extremely important to me. I am not a creative in the creative sense, but I did try today, Rick, hair up. When you come from the space that I come from, which is the strictly legal sense, we don't always allow ourselves to be as creative as we need to be. But I do feel that Zimbabwe needs, more than ever, a very strong creative spirit right now. So thank you very much to Lo and the team for driving this. I'm going to cut straight to the topic at hand today, which is equality. The question of equality is something that's important for every single human being, because without it, you cannot achieve or attain justice. Whenever you speak of injustice, you're speaking to an element of inequality. So I'm going to center my talk on three forms of inequality that I think are most pressing for me as a young Zimbabwean woman right now. I'd love for this talk to take the form of a conversation, so I'm going to speak for a short while, then hopefully we can drive a few questions and get talking. So I'm going to talk about three forms of inequality. The first is to do with the inequality between the young and the old. The second is the inequality that's centered around gender. So inequality between men and women. Then finally, I'm going to talk about tribal, racial inequality, which is something that we've tried to bury for a very long time in Zimbabwe. But it bubbles over every now and again, and I think particularly as the younger generation, we need to do something to start addressing the inequality, the discrimination that's coming up there. So I'll start with inequality centered around age. Now, if you're a young African, you're in a traditional household, you learn very quickly that your place as a young person is right at the bottom. You have to sit on the floor, because the guests, they're older. When the older people, your parents are talking, you don't talk, you keep quiet. If you're a new entrant in a job, your role is to be seen but not heard. That's what our culture propounds. As a result of this, we've seen a reluctance by young people to get involved when it comes to decision making. That really affects us. Now, the reason this is particularly important for us right now is that young people make the majority in terms of the demographic sectioning of the population. There are more young people than not. Now we need to zone in on that. What are we talking about when we say young? We're talking about people who are under 35. And even when we say that, really if we look at a 35-year-old in the grand scheme of things, can we say they're young? No, but we say that in Zimbabwe because if your oldest, your most senior citizen, the president, is 94, 35 seems pretty young. Like 18, you don't even begin to talk about you because the people who are 50 and 60 are still waiting their turn. The effect of this is that young people have been excluded, even in the political space, particularly over the last 5 years. The role of young people has diminished significantly. And I'm not saying that we're completely absent, of course. If they need someone to mobilize a demonstration, my youth, come, If they need someone to be active on social media, they'll be like, come. But when it comes to running for a parliamentary seat, you're very unlikely to come across a 25-year-old running for parliament. By comparison, in South Africa, the youngest parliamentarian is 24. She gave an amazing speech sometime last year on public education. There is a need, if parliament is to be the voice of the people, the voice of representing the people, we have to have young people represented there. Now, I'm not saying then that being young on its own is a qualifying factor. No. In addition to being young, you're more likely to be creative, you're more likely to be, have a different way of looking at the world, but there's an additional responsibility on the young to ensure that we're competent, to ensure that we actually have something to bring to the table. to ensure that we have the creative ideas and creative spirit that is going to take the country forward. You know, we're more likely to be outward looking, to look at what our global friends are doing. So we must, you know, make that assessment and see how we can measure up. We must do everything that we can to get into conversation with the generations that were ahead of us, okay? I don't propound, I don't propose at all that any generation, any voice, any age should be excluded. Everybody should be excluded, because remember, the key word is equality, not exclusion. But we must try and start those conversations. Like I said, traditionally, you know, for you to sit down and say to your dad, hey dad, why did you mess up? That's not traditional, it's countercultural in the African context, but we need to start doing that so that we achieve some sort of equality between the generations. And we've got a strong responsibility as young people to take this country forward. Because if it keeps going down, if it keeps on maintaining the trajectory that it's on, in 10 years, we're going to have some very big problems. Okay, I mean, if we don't have tap water in 2017, you know, I don't imagine what our problems will be like in 2020. If we're fighting medieval diseases like typhoid in 2017, I shudder to believe what we'll be dealing with. You know, we'll have a polio outbreak very soon at the rate that we're going. We just cannot afford that. I mean, Zimbabweans are so much better than that. So much better than having to negotiate potholes and tap water when, you know, other people were going to the moon in the 60s. We really have to move forward. And sorry to just do a bit of politicking. One of the things that we want to do from our Pleasant constituency is, you know, place a big focus on tech, because that's what young people all over the world are doing. And we need to, you know, harness the move towards embracing tech. Our 10-year-olds should be coding. You know, we don't want them to just be stuck at doing only maths, only Pythagoras theorem. They should know how to code. Because there's some apps that we need as Zimbabweans, young and old, that we can't expect to come from Silicon Valley. Imagine if we had an app that told us, you know, what roadblocks are where. I mean, imagine if we had that technology. And we can't expect that to come from anywhere else. It has to come from us. And so I think the inequality between the young and the old is something that we must be aware of. We must do everything that we can to bridge the generational divide between the young and the old in Zimbabwe, and see how we can participate, how do we contribute, how do we engage those who've, you know, been at this for a lot longer than we have. I turn to the second extreme of inequality, which is the inequality between men and women. Now, this is not a favorite topic, you know, sometimes even amongst the young. You know, you saw after Hillary Clinton's campaign that even the word feminism has been sullied, you know, in this generation. You know, people don't want to talk about some of the structural inequality that a woman faces. But I think it's important to say, particularly in the traditional African setting that we have in Zimbabwe, that it's countercultural for a woman to be speaking out. It's countercultural for a young girl to insist upon the enforcement of her rights. It's countercultural, especially, you know, if you're not married and you don't have the status that society thinks you should have for you to be taken seriously. And so the inequality we face there is something that we need not only be aware of, but we need to start addressing in a very serious way. In Zimbabwe, starting from about the 80s, 85, to about the early 90s, there was a very strong, you know, women's liberation movement that saw, you know, the building of the capacity and strength of women. Women got freed from what was known as the marital power. Women could now, can you believe that in the 80s, prior to 1980, women could not, you know, buy property in their own name. They had to have authority from their husband. But you know, the women's movement, including the SASA project, and so on, did a lot of work to ensure that the rights of women were addressed. You also saw them doing a lot of work around inheritance laws, skewed marital laws. So we must ensure that the movement that was started there does not die. We must ensure as women that we occupy space at the decision-making table, not, you know, as a token, not tokenistic representation, not as, you know, that pitiful vote that, oh, okay, we need 10 women just to fill spaces. No, women are competent, women are capable. We must ensure that our voices are heard. You know, when things go pear-shaped in the country, women often are the first to feel the brunt of it economically because, you know, they run families, they've got children, etc. So we must ensure as young people, as young women, older women as well, that our voices are heard and that our concerns remain important. You know, there's a big issue concerning the wage gap. You know, what women earn versus what men earn for doing the exact same work. We must ensure that that's, you know, something that we continue to fight for. Paid maternity leave. You know, there's now a declining respect for paid maternity leave. You see a lot of women who go on maternity leave and the employees say, look, we're simply not going to pay you while you're gone. Those sort of things are things that we must keep at the forefront, the mainstream of conversations to ensure that, you know, women are equal in the workplace, in the boardroom, in the courtroom to their male counterparts. And even if you look at the strategic positions in this country, whether it's the role of Chief Justice, Attorney General, Minister of Finance, we want to see women occupying those key roles. We don't want a situation where, you know, women ministers are only relegated to the position of, you know, labor and social welfare. There's nothing wrong with that. It's very important, but we mustn't engender the roles that are important, as it were. I come to the last stream of inequality that I'd like to discuss. And this is around, you know, tribe, race in the country. Over the last, can I say about 18, 19 years, Zimbabwe's gone through, you know, a very harrowing racial debate, discussion. You know, the impact of the land reform had, you know, raised its own tensions. We also see increasingly now a lot of tribalism is coming up. You know, you hear that there's this Karanga mafia, there's Zulu mafia. You know, whenever something comes up, you know, in the south of the country, the Ndebeles feel like they're not heard. I'd like to urge upon everyone the need to see that at the end of the day, we're all Zimbabwean. We need to try and move away from living in the past and see how we can unite to go forward in the future. And in saying this, I'm not saying we should ignore the injustices of the past, but we should work towards seeing how we can reconcile and ensure that every Zimbabwean, it doesn't matter whether you're Shona or Ndebele, whether you're black or white or brown, it doesn't matter, you know, which religious persuasion you come from, everybody should feel like they've got space. Everyone should feel like they've got a voice. We must not discriminate against anyone based on, you know, something that's part of their identity, because that would lead to inequality. So in closing, I just want to urge upon everyone to engage with the tough conversations around inequality. When we see structural inequality, we must not be afraid to raise it. We must not, if we're in a position of privilege, be afraid to stand up and speak out on behalf of other people who are weaker. So if you see, you know, someone else who's facing a challenge that's based on inequality, don't be afraid to stand up for them and say, hang on, this is not okay. Because the minute we keep quiet about structural inequality, it becomes embedded. And we really deprive ourselves of some very quality minds, some very quality creators, some very quality people on the basis of grounds that really should serve to unite us and not divide us. Thank you.
Lovely. So I guess now we can just open it up if anyone has any questions. I know because I had expressed that she wanted to have more of a conversation than just talking at you guys. So this is the time if anyone has a question or would like to bring something. Please do. Nothing? No one? Chris?
Mine starts first in the political space. In the head and to contest with the Mount Pleasant constituent. Just yesterday, there was a very interesting article in the Herald, someone saying that you do not lose sleep. And you know, he was going to town talking about having done development in Mount Pleasant where he said he's working with council to patch potholes and youths have been empowered to sell flowers. You've looked at issues that are in one place what are, you talked about, empowering young people for them to take themselves. What are some of the issues that you have seen in Mount Pleasant that you say, if I'm to engage the Mount Pleasant community, they'll vote for you?
Okay, great. So we've done a lot of community outreach. We've sat in people's homes, we've gone to schools, we've spoken to a lot of people, and we're continuing to do so. And what emerges from these conversations are a number of issues. So one of the key things that people complain of is the fact that there's no maternity clinic at the district, maternity service at the district clinic at Bond, with the result that anyone who tries to, anyone who wants to have a baby has to travel long distances. Warren Park, Edith Opperman, and by the way, those district clinics have those services, and that's something very basic. Every district clinic should have a maternity clinic, and I think if you're focusing on people's issues, you would be alive to that. We've also observed, like I said, a lot of the young people say, you know what, I want to feel a sense of progress, a sense of development. I want to feel like I'm part of a 21st century economy, which is why we partnered with a team who want to introduce coding for young people. And then I come to just local authority services. I feel like there hasn't been enough accountability with respect to the functioning of local authorities. So your water, just trying to get water in Mount Pleasant is a tough issue. We haven't had running water for the longest time, and occasionally when it comes, it's dirty. That's a big problem for people. And then potholes, if you go along Pendennis, there are potholes. If you go along Alps Road, there are potholes. If you go to Avondale, just the shopping centre, there are potholes. If you go to Strathaven on West Road, it's just pothole upon pothole upon pothole. If you compare these roads to the Newlands bypass, you can see that we've got a very big roads problem there, and people have an issue with this. Waste management, very, very poor waste management. You go for sometimes a month without refuse being collected. What this means is you've got more rats everywhere, but more fundamentally, people just start burning their waste. That has its own impact on the environment. We want birds in Mount Pleasant. The more you burn, the more you've got poor waste management. You won't see that. We all saw what happened with the Moto dump site, the fire that raged there, again, because of very poor waste management systems. We need, a cleaner, greener, safer Mount Pleasant. Crime has become such an issue. And there are small groups that have set up very effective neighborhood watches. But we want to expand that so that almost every neighborhood has a rapid response team to deal with crime. We want to ensure that every neighborhood has a strong relationship with the police service that attends to it, so that when you have an incident at your house, you feel safe and there's someone you can call and you get the police to actually come and help you. So those are some of the key issues that have come up. The issue of wetlands, very big issue, where people are building on land that's supposed to be preserved, with the result that we end up having these water crises that we really shouldn't. Along Chatsworth, you've just got open sewer pipes, and sewage just is poorly managed. In fact, not managed at all. You've got sewage everywhere. If you drive along Chatsworth, if you walk along there, if you run along there, you're punched in the face by this very pungent smell of sewage. Like, who's doing anything about that? Recreational facilities, the pool at McDonald's, the pool at Mount Pleasant, again, in a very terrible state. Community halls, completely decrepit. Recreational parks, places where people are supposed to be playing soccer, just having a bit of time at the weekend. People are just building willy-nilly on that. All of those are problems that people raise, and those are some of the key issues that we'd like to address. I won't go into my manifesto too much, but those are a lot of the things that we'd like to address, and the manifesto is centered on three key pillars: hope, accountability, development. We want stronger community spirit in Mount Pleasant. With all the shopping centres, all the supermarkets we've got, we shouldn't, at the end of the day, have any homeless people begging. We want to ensure that, we manage our resources in such a way and have enough community spirit to ensure that the people who are begging at every intersection aren't forced into those conditions because we have participated. We need to make homelessness an issue. I won't go into the wider national issues with cash crises. At every bank in Mount Pleasant there's a long queue. That's a problem that we must not run away from, and that must be dealt with.
Okay. the politics that we have had in Zimbabwe over the past years. Somebody is voted because he comes from a certain party. Like in the case of Mount Pleasant, if I look at, I was a resident of Mount Pleasant for over 3 years. You spoke about water. We used to buy water every week. So that history of having politicians who are voted simply because they come from a certain political party, and then the issue of then having a man who is forwarded as a candidate, and if a woman wants to step up, they are told to stay behind and vote for this man. And you have come forward to offer yourself. How are the people, as you go around, receiving you? And because you are speaking to issues that they're experiencing every day, as opposed to say, we will not be lose sleep because you're just a barking dog who's barking at an elephant. How are people receiving you?
Okay, so I must say that the response to the campaign has been phenomenal. We've engaged with, and people have come forward with a number of things. All of what I'm telling you is not stuff that we've independently verified, but people who literally come forward and told us that these are their issues. They've invited us into their spaces to speak to them, and so the response has been really, really good. I do think, and I think it's something refreshing about the campaign, that we're talking about the issues. We're not talking faction X versus faction Y, because really what affects me as a Zimbabwean is my daily struggle. Whether you come from a particular political party or faction is not the issue. The bottom line is, I need to put food on my table. I need a strong public health system. I need strong education. I want to trust the tertiary institution that I send my child to. Those are the issues that people face. And the minute you start speaking to people, that's when you start to see this apathy fall away. People start to be interested. And one thing that's key about the Be the Change campaign is we're the for campaign. Okay, we're not talking about all the things that are wrong, but we're talking about what solutions we can present, what things we'd like to do, what are we for, what do we represent. We'd like a more transformed Mount Pleasant constituency, and we're taking steps actively to bring that about. So I think it's been extremely well received. We've got a growing group of volunteers, which you're going to see on the street this weekend. We've got a lot of professionals. We've got a very strong legal team that's been put together. We've got a strong corporate strategy as well, a lot of big business in Mount Pleasant. So it's been extremely well received. The students as well from the university and from high schools, extremely interested in a lot of the work that we're doing. But I'll be clear about one thing. We don't take anyone for granted. We don't take any vote for granted. It's important for everyone to feel like they've got a voice and like their vote is something that's been worked for and is going to pay off a dividend for them in the future.
Okay, I have a question on, you spoke about the need for women to occupy the political space, and for those occupying the space to actually go up. So my question is, there is talk of the first letter by some ambitions probably to go higher the ladder. And in the context of your urging that women should go up the political ladder, what's your take on that?
About the youth participation. The fact of one being young, one being a woman, is just the starting point. Okay, we must ensure that every demographic member of society is represented in our political spaces. That said, the fact that I'm a woman is not a qualifying factor. People have to scrutinize me for my sincerity of motive and my plan for progress. So the same goes for the First Lady. I think that we have to scrutinize her motives very carefully. We have to see what the track record of her party is. We have to see what they've promised versus what they've delivered, and it will be very easy for us to conclude in the end that she might not be the best candidate to occupy this space, despite the fact that she's a woman. So I'm not suggesting at any rate that any old woman should occupy high office, but I do think that it's important, and there are lots of capable women, there are lots of competent women, there are lots of sincere women who do very well in some of these roles, and I think they should be given a chance and they must step up as well. Yep.
You talked about racial inequality, and I think for me, I guess the question is, yes, we want to reconcile and have, like, democracy for everybody, but how do you think we can effectively deal with the past and confront certain issues that still kind of exist right now, so that, you know, it's not, we're not smiling at each other, but, you know, inside of
It's
like,
genuine.
you know what I mean? Yeah.
Absolutely. So I do think that one of the things that South Africa is grappling with right now is a sort of papering over, you know, very deep-seated, very structural inequality, racism, and so on. So I don't suggest for a minute that we, you know, we ignore the past. But I do think we have to, when we're discussing and having these conversations, which is an important first step, to look towards the future more than we look towards the past. Because regrettably, there's nothing we can do about our history. We're saddled with it. But I think the people, the nations that succeed, are the nations that manage the hand that they're dealt with as though it's the hand that they wanted. So I think at some point, as Zimbabweans, we have to look past things like race, look past things like tribe and so on, and ask ourselves, okay, how do we move forward? Land reform is a big example, okay? It's a ton of dead capital just sitting there. Complete disrespect of property rights. We all know it's common sense. You don't have to be black, you don't have to be white to figure out that unless you've got land tenure, unless people have security to the title of their land, we cannot move forward, because farmers don't have a big sum of money just sitting around for them to farm. They need to go and borrow on their land. The land has to be tradable. And the minute agriculture starts moving, it means all the other spin-off industries start moving. You get more manufacturing, industry starts to run, then, you know, the energy sector starts to run, and people get jobs, and the engines of the economy start to run. So let's think about that, and let's put progress in the forefront as opposed to history, discrimination, and, you know, this sort of politicking that rouses emotions, but that doesn't solve the problem.
Why is that? Well, I know, like, when you are on, when politicians are on a campaign, you have your community that you want to reach out to and speak to, so they hear from you and they get your vote. My question to you is, why do you think the creative community itself has been neglected? Secondly, as part of your manifesto and your work, has engaging and encouraging the creative community to participate in the process been a point that you thought about?
Yes, so please, Lo, go and read the Yellow Manifesto. There's a whole section dedicated to creatives, the arts, music, media, and so on. And it's important for us because, you know what? There's so many spaces in a constituency like Mount Pleasant that really need to be jazzed up, just so that they're more aesthetically appealing, and we need creatives to do that. You know, we need music, we need art galleries. We've got so many amazing artists in the constituency. We need to give them their space. We need to ensure that they showcase their work. We need more tech hubs like this. You know, Moto Republic should be replicated in almost every neighborhood. Creatives deserve their space because, you know, sometimes what you find is that the way a lawyer articulates a political point is often very, you know, bland, boring. That's why people don't listen. But if you get a creative to put together, whether it's a picture, whether it's a song, whether it's a, you know, a piece of theatrical art, you know, people engage with that a lot easier. People engage with satire. So it's very important because, you know, creativity gives people a voice. And it does so in an engaging way, in a manner that engages and exercises our mind and the other side of our mind in a very different way. You know, pictures are important, music is important, and I think it's a matter of regret that politicians have not taken advantage of creators, because I think they've got a very important voice. And I think more important than them, you know, driving engagement, the issues that they face are political issues. And, you know, creatives sometimes run away from politics, but they don't realize that it affects them directly. Matters of intellectual property, you know, the Copyright and Neighborhood Rights Act is a piece of legislation. So you need a member of parliament, you know, to make sure that your interests are represented properly as creative, and so that your creative and artistic work is properly protected as a matter of law, and to ensure that those laws are enforced and enforced properly. So we need the politics, we need the creatives, and I think the best outcome is for a synergy to be formed between, those who are, in strict politics, creatives, very important voice. That voice must be heard, and the voice of a creative must be heard beyond being called to sing at a rally. That's very tokenistic. That's not enough, and as far as I go. The role must be more important. You've got a whole ministry dedicated towards the arts and culture, and that ministry is not headed up by a creative. That's a problem for me, because how do they expect them to push the agenda of creativity forward, the agenda of the arts? They've never been an artist themselves. They don't know what the issues are, and they don't sit with you, more importantly, to hear what those concerns are. So I think, it's a political issue, and I think the more we start to characterize it as such and to look at it in that prism, the more likely we are to ensuring that the voice of the creatives is heard and used, and killing apathy and all the things that creativity is good for. Yes, ma'am.
You recommended that whenever one sees inequality, you should speak out and report it. But I think that for one to do that, it requires a great amount of bravery. So you, as a brave person, the fact that you are right in front of us right now, that you are brave, what would you say? What's your advice for one to be that brave to speak out whenever they see inequality or abuse or injustice?
I think it's very important to have courage, very important to have bravery, and I just wish we had more of it in Zimbabwe, because I do think a lot of what we face is really a function of people knowing that what's going on is wrong, but being afraid to stand up because of fear. And I think the biggest weapon that we can use as a society to fight against fear is uniting and coming together. Because it's easy to shoot Fadzai down if she's a lone voice. It's easy to arrest her. It's easy to victimize her. But if everyone comes together and raises their voice into a chorus, I think it's easier for those who want to repress the voice of the people who want to speak out, to be weakened, as it were. So I think more people need to come out, and sometimes it just takes that one person to start, to spark the fire of engagement or speaking out against a particular injustice. Because all it takes for bad things to proliferate, to continue, is for good men to do nothing. So the minute you keep quiet, you're complicit in causing the suffering of those who are suffering, those who are, if we see a woman in town being harassed because of what she's wearing, it's our duty as a society to stop and say, excuse me, you do not do that to another woman. If we see a rank marshal, tapping a woman on her bottom, we have to say, excuse me, what is that? We don't join in ridiculing that woman. We don't join in. The minute someone starts speaking at someone, in a tone that's aggressive, that we have to stop. Not to whip out our phones, but to say, excuse me, what's going on here? And I think that ability as a community to stand up for each other is what's going to go a long way in taking us, out of this crisis. And you see it happening, increasingly with the police. When someone is victimized by the police, I do now see people stopping and saying, officer, you can't do that. We need more of that, You don't just drive past and continue as if nothing's happening, because one day you'll be the victim and you'll definitely need someone to speak out for you. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
What's your take on the way that government does it things? Like, it requires diaspora investment, but it doesn't allow them to vote, but they want their money.
If I were the diaspora, I would not send my hard money to Zimbabwe. I think it's completely deplorable that our government is not facilitating the diaspora vote. And just to bring things into their proper context, the postal vote, the diaspora vote, is not something that cannot be done. There's a precedent for it, because all Zimbabweans who are serving officially abroad, your ambassadors, those who work for the UN, international organizations, etc., have a mechanism by which they can vote. And all it takes is for us to extend that for other people. And I think what needs to be done is to, okay, if it's going to cost money, tell the diaspora community how much money is going to cost. If it's going to cost me $10 to ensure that there's a voting slip for me and the postal charges are there, how much does it cost to post something across the world? It can't be too much. And you put it in the same diplomatic bag as the other things, and you ensure that there's proper security. I just think that what's lacking in Zimbabwe is the political will. Rwanda allows its diaspora members, where there are missions, to vote. And we're not saying go to Kazakhstan and set up a polling office there. That's not what we're contending. But we're saying, look, there's certain areas where we know there's a high concentration of Zimbabweans. We know in South Africa there are lots of Zimbabweans. You know, some figures suggest over 2 million. We know that in the UK there are lots of Zimbabweans. We know that we've got a Zimbabwean embassy in the UK. We know that we've got a Zimbabwean embassy in South Africa. What would it take for them to ensure that, you know, the same way the ambassador to South Africa and his staff are voting, you extend that privilege to the other people in South Africa? And we're not saying go to every single city. If we're told that, look, everyone will vote in Pretoria at this time and this date, they can do so. The same goes for the UK. Look, everyone vote in London at this time, on this date. This is how much it will cost for you to register. And I'm sure they're willing to put up part of the cost, because if you say to someone, pay £40 to ensure that all the administrative stuff is taken care of, if it is indeed a genuine concern about money, they're more likely to pay that, and it costs less than having to fly to Zimbabwe. It's not as easy as, oh, just fly to Zimbabwe and come and vote, because some people are, you know, working long hours in jobs in the diaspora, so they can't just come back willy-nilly. Right now, we don't even know when voter registration is going to happen. How do you plan your life? We don't even know when the election date is. How do you plan your life? You can't just drop everything in the middle of work in New York and say, I'm going, do you get what I mean? So there is a need. In the same way we don't expect every ambassador to fly to Zimbabwe to come and vote, let's just extend that to our other members in the diaspora community. We're always begging them, send remittances home. Certainly in 2008, they did prop up the economy. We can't run away from that. And so there's a need to respect Zimbabweans in the diaspora. A lot of them are there not because they don't love Zimbabwe, but circumstances have forced them. And you know, a lot of them are acquiring skills that will be useful to us in the future. So let's build the synergies and relationships. Let's not just make it a parasitic relationship where we want to take away from them, but you know, not give them their civil rights as well. So, and that section does not depend on your location. So let's facilitate the fulfillment of this right as opposed to restricting it.
Okay. 2018, people are talking about the young vote, the game changer. Right now, if you ask a lot of young people, especially those who are between the age of 18 and 25, some they've never voted, some say there's no reason for me to vote because we've never seen anything changing. What would you say to such a demographic to say it is important for you to vote? What would you say to them? Because if we look around in this room, if we look at our age group, somebody, I was talking to someone one of the days, he was saying that, you know what, we are going to inherit a broken country. So if we don't step up, no one is going to do that for us. What would you say to the young voter who hasn't voted in any of the past elections, or who has voted but says, I will not vote in 2018?
Right, so before I say what I have to say to the young people, I'd like to speak to the politicians first. Because you actually find that a lot of young people do want to vote, but they're like, Asha, Fadzai, who do I vote for? No one is speaking to what are my concerns. Nobody represents what I want in a politician. So I think the first thing I have to say would be to the politicians themselves. They need to really go out of their way to connect with the young. And they shouldn't do it in a tokenistic way that, you know, young people, youth interface. No, they have to go further and actually hear their concerns out. They've got very real concerns. Don't say to a 17-year-old, just go and vote, and you don't even hear from him what his strongest political issue is. You know, so I think we must, as politicians, do a lot more to capture the imagination of the young. Instead of making elections all about violence, all about retaining power, let's offer hope, let's offer inspiration. Because these 17-year-olds actually are very political. They can tell you the blow by blow of Trump's campaign. They can tell you the blow by blow of Brexit. They are people who've got the capacity to mentally consume political issues, but we're not doing enough as politicians to reach out to them. Coming to the young people themselves, I really encourage them. There's no shame in the fact, or if you've never voted before, I've never voted before. But what's important is to realize the long-term impact of your failing to vote. When I ask you to vote, I'm not actually asking you to do something for me, I'm asking you to do something for yourself. You don't, as an 18-year-old, as a 25-year-old, I teach students, you don't want to be crashing on your mom's couch at 30. You don't want that. You know, you don't want to be struggling for a job upon graduation. You don't want to not be able to afford a car at 26. You don't want that. You want a better life for yourself. You want to know that, look, if I get the 11 points, if I get the 15 points, there's a plan and I can do it. If I become a doctor, I'm not going to be earning $1 per hour when I'm on call, because that's what not voting translates to. And so it's important for young people to be able to connect the dots and realize that if you don't participate, you're going to lose out. And it's not a solution to say, no, I'll go to South Africa. I'll tell you something about South Africa. South Africans don't want Zimbabweans there. No matter how much you characterize their statements as xenophobic, they don't want you there. You can't change their minds on that. They don't want you. They don't even want you waiting their tables, let alone getting the bigger job. So your space abroad is shrinking. Trump's America has no space for a black American. What more you wear with Shakurudo? There's just no space for you. If you go to the UK, there's no space for a European, someone who's Polish. What more you wear with? Tafadzwa, the space globally abroad for a Zimbabwean to go up, to penetrate the glass ceiling, to do well, is shrinking. And so the sooner young people who are 17 or 18 realize that, look, your back's against the wall. If you don't step out, participate, ensure your voice is heard, it's your life that's going to be ruined. So I'm imploring every young person to be selfish about this. Registering to vote is selfish. You're preserving yourself, your own interests, your own children, your own, welfare, your own ability to earn. There's nothing more annoying than, going to school, working hard, coming first every single year, getting 15 points, going to the UZ. These students, med students, are there for 5 years, only to leave, and the conditions they operate in Pari, deplorable. You can't even buy a car. You're a doctor who's 32, and you just cannot afford the basics. Like, that is cruel. That's punishment, and it's punishment that we're meting out on ourselves because we're refusing to participate. So that's what I'd say to the young.
Okay, so we're running out of time. I have time for just one more question if there is any. If
Arifan, you've been having some campaigns, right?
Correct.
Have you been attacked, what's this been the scenario for the other opposition parties, like for MDC and the NPP?
Okay.
Where your rallies, are avoided to take place.
Where what?
Where your rallies are avoided to take place.
Okay, so your questions are, have I been attacked by the opposition? Have I had problems conducting rallies?
Exactly.
Okay, so I'll deal with that first question. The Yellow campaign is a poor campaign. We're not fighting sideways, okay? So we have no problem whatsoever with the NDC. We have no problem whatsoever with the NPP and all the wide array of political parties. A true democracy means plurality. You can't stop anyone from doing what they do. But what I'd urge upon the political parties, and whenever I'm asked my take on them, I say this: they must stay true to the cause that inspired them to start the great work that they did. They must stay true to the ideals of democracy. They must stay true to meeting people's needs. There was a time that the NDC was known to be a workers' party. Workers' rights were at the forefront of the agenda. Student rights were at the forefront of the agenda. So when you heard the NDC speak, you could immediately see that, look, what they're fighting for is That's okay. What they're fighting for is improved working conditions. What they're fighting for is fair labor rights. As a student, they were fighting in your corner. They were fighting for jobs. I'd really encourage them, to stay true to that DNA. And as far as the attacks are concerned, look, Fadzai must be scrutinized like anyone else. Everybody has got a political right to free speech. You've got the right to say, you know what, your problem is X, Y, Z, or I, disagree with X, Y, Z. What I'd encourage people to do though, let's engage each other on the ideas, okay? Sometimes I feel the criticism is so basic that all we're doing is holding ourselves back. Let's engage on the ideas, on the plan for progress, on the sincerity of motive. And it's important to get all our facts straight as we do so. About holding rallies, we've never had a difficulty holding rallies, but I don't think that, a big fat rally where everyone's in the sun is the best way to engage and communicate with people, personally. And so while rallies have their place in the political space, we as a campaign have a slightly different way of engaging, especially as we start. We're engaging people in their small community spaces, talking to people directly, because you know what, I don't want to spend 2 hours just talking out to people. I actually want to hear what their feedback is, hear what their concerns are, because that puts you in a good position to be able to represent them. Otherwise, who are you representing if you haven't heard their voice? Towards the election, etc., we will have a rally, but right now is really the time to engage with people, to hear what they have to say, to spread information. A lot of people are disempowered because they don't have information. They don't know how to register to vote. They don't know when the vote is going to take place. They don't know their basic constitutional rights. They don't know what information they have to gather to vote. So we need to have a strong voter education drive, a strong voter registration campaign, and all of that before the rally, because what's important is to ensure that people are registered to vote, to ensure that you've spoken to their issues and that you've heard what their deep concerns are. Only then, once we've done all that groundwork, we can then have a rally and say, you know what, the fruit of our labor over the last 12 months is X, Y, Z. This is what we stand for, and this is our vision going forward.
It's been really great. I really want to thank you for taking the time to actually be here and come speak to us. Creative Morning is going to happen every month, the last Friday of each month, and you're encouraged to come next month and be here with us.
Thank you so
and
much.
I hope you guys have a great Friday and a great weekend.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Doug. Thank you so much, everyone. I really value the time you've taken to just come to this conversation and be a part of it. Please spread the message. We have to be the change that we wish to see in the community. If we wait for change to happen, it's not going to land on our plates. We really have to be a bit more active in trying to secure it. So thank you very much. God bless you. Spread the word. And most importantly, register to vote and ensure that you do vote and you defend your vote thereafter. Thank you. Yay! Thank you. This is why I need to dash though.
Of course.
Yeah. So